Tropical Storm Pilar close to El Salvador on tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for October 31st. Well, today we have a tropical storm in the eastern Pacific and still the remnants of Tammy which are swirling around the Atlantic there, and a few other areas of interest to be watching on this Halloween. 75 storms so far this year around the world were still code blue. Well, in the Atlantic, we've got the ghoulish remains of Tammy, which are still swirling out over the central Atlantic, as well as another area of interest near the Bahamas, which is also fading out 20%, and a 40% now for the other area of interest, which is in the Caribbean Sea, and that's looking more likely to form later in the week. In the eastern Pacific, we've got Tropical Storm Pilar, of course, which could become a scare story for the coast of El Salvador. It will get uncomfortably close, and an area of interest which is further out to sea. 30% that we're still giving on that one. It could give us a little fright and become a brief tropical cyclone. In the western Pacific, we've got two areas of interest right now. One of them is very close to the Philippines, and another one well towards the east there, which might have higher hopes later on, coming up later in the week into next week. And in the North Indian Ocean, things are looking very quiet there right now. Not much going on at all. No areas of interest, although the JWC do have one invest marked, that little thing there south of Socotra Island in Yemen. And in the southern hemisphere, we've still got Lola, and you can only see a little bit of it there, which is scraping the northern part of New Zealand, the North Island, and has weakened now a little bit further to 35 miles per hour, so no more gale force winds, but the storm's influence will continue to swipe through the North Island. Well, let's take a look at Pilar then. Tropical storm watch in effect for El Salvador eastwards to Puerto Sandino, Nicaragua, Puerto Sandino. It is currently 345 kilometers from Los Cabanos, 399 from San Salvador, 430 from Guatemala City, 458 from San Miguel, and 583 from Tegucigalpa, the capital of Honduras. The storm will continue in a general northeasterly vein and then do a big 180 and turn right back on itself and move towards the southwest later on in the week. Let's take a look at the satellite imagery then. Pilar, first of all, is doing okay. It's got lots of wind shear trying to tear it apart, but it's still blowing up quite significant amounts of convection, mainly on its western side. Lots of convection and cloudiness just lingering around towards the east there as well. No real structure on that around the coastal areas of Central America at this time, but the main bulk of the storm is still well at sea, and it is going to be a small core, and that's probably a pattern that will continue through the entire life of this storm. It's starting to appear on radar returns here from, I think it's Nicaragua radar, showing quite a lot of rainy conditions reaching the coast of El Salvador. Well, here is a very skeletal looking invest which doesn't have really anything going for it, as you can see, passing east of the northernmost islands of the Bahamas. And here's the other invest in the eastern Pacific, which is blowing up convection, but the rotation really isn't going for it right now, and it's looking very disjointed, should we say, with significant convection but not much else. Here's the Western Pacific system, which is impacting the Philippines right now, that invest. It doesn't look like it's going to form at all, but it could become a large rain event for parts of central to northern Philippines, particularly in southern Luzon, and possibly over the capital Manila. And you can see there on some radar imagery just how strong some of those rainfall bands are, very squally, reaching the northern tip of Catanduanes right now. Well, sea surface temperatures in the eastern Pacific still look fairly good in a few spots, especially off the coast of Mexico and further east, of course, where Pilar is right now, pushing close to 30 degrees Celsius still. In the Atlantic, the Caribbean is very much the hot spot still, of course, pretty much untapped throughout the whole year, and lots of energy waiting for that system to form over there, and that could be a big bang to go out for this season. Hopefully not. In the rest of the Atlantic, still warm temperatures in the open ocean Ocean, but cooler further north now. Western Pacific is also starting to cool down, but the Philippine Sea still very warm, over 30 degrees Celsius, and east of Guam too. The southern part of the South China Sea still boiling, the northern part now really cooling down, especially along the coast of China and Hong Kong, temperatures falling below 26 now over there. Bay of Bengal has its hottest spot further east towards the Andaman Sea and the coast of Myanmar, where temperatures are pushing above 30 degrees Celsius, and the Arabian Sea is generally warm as well further east, temperatures pushing 30 there as well. Near Madagascar, really getting warm there now, and Mascarene Islands, Mauritius, pushing above 26 degrees now, and very warm off the coast of northern Australia, 30 degrees plus near that region, the top end, and in the South Pacific those temperatures are really creeping up now as well over Vanuatu and Fiji and getting close to New Caledonia. Compared to average, it's the South China Sea that's the warmest area in the Western Pacific compared to average. Same too off the coast of Western Australia and around Mauritius, very warm compared to normal. Eastern Pacific, it's the deep tropics that are warmest. In the higher latitudes, not so much. And in the Atlantic, temperatures are looking very good compared to normal. In the Caribbean Sea, as we keep mentioning, that is the area to watch now. And look at the oceanic heat content, still extremely high values over large chunks of the Caribbean Sea. Potential good news is that this forecasted storm might dip a little bit south of all of that energy. The Eastern Pacific is really running on empty now, with all of these storms taking away a lot of energy, and the Western Pacific is still holding on there in the Philippine Sea and extending eastwards. So let's see what the GFS model has to show for itself in the next 5 days. You can see all three of these systems. First of all, Pilar on the left-hand side there, getting a fright there as it gets close to El Salvador and turning away, running in the opposite direction and being shunted away by the influence of the next tropical cyclone in the Atlantic there, forming in the Caribbean Sea in around 2 or 3 days. So you can see Pilar there speeding off towards the west, weakening at first, but might get stronger later on as it passes the Gulf of Tehuantepec and moves further towards the south. Then that second system moving into Honduras or Nicaragua as a substantial tropical storm or maybe a hurricane. Western Pacific, looking into that 5-day period, there might be a system that forms towards the end of that time, heading slowly towards the Mariana Islands, a very small compact system, and briefly looking at the other one moving through the Philippines there, it never really gets a rotation going, so it is going to be probably a linear storm that moves through large parts of Luzon in the next 24 to 48 hours. Looking at rainfall expectations now, we're obviously very concerned that these two storms could provide a 1-2 punch for this area as far as rainfall is concerned. Now obviously Pilar, it doesn't look like it's going to deliver very strong winds to the coast, but that could still happen. But even if it does turn away before reaching land, we could look at both of those storms causing major rainfall amounts. Look at that, 41 inches there for parts of western Honduras. That is over 1,000 millimeters. This will be from two storms combined. 20 inches on the southern extremity of Honduras as well there. That's half of that, 500 millimeters, and large amounts of rain all around those areas. Honduras and Nicaragua particularly, and El Salvador getting very high amounts of rainfall, and you could be looking at amounts up to and exceeding 500 millimeters. Very high amounts. In the medium range then, we're looking once again at this same area. What happens to the to Pilar, first of all, moving towards the west there, gets its second wind and becomes a very compact and fairly strong hurricane, really, when you look at that, probably category 2. And look at the Atlantic there, that system moving well inland, and it really becomes a bit of a mess, becomes very enlarged, but still has that rotation as it moves back into the Western Caribbean and towards the Cayman Islands, but doesn't have very much strength left there, barely tropical storm status. And in the Western Pacific, what becomes of that storm that had its first showing there near Guam? Well, it kind of loses its way, and then it tries to form again, but then probably gets beaten to the punch by that second system that forms behind it, and there is potentially a typhoon impact for Guam towards the end of that 10-day period. So it could be two storms that strengthen out of all of this. But it's hard to say. GFS has been forecasting something coming out of this for weeks now, it feels like. So this may not be clear-cut at all either. But that's all the serious stuff done with. You can take a look at the Full 13 merch store by scanning the barcode and taking a look at all our products, full season and individual storm animations, as well as our clothing and our full season and our still waiting for Hone t-shirts. I almost read the same line twice. Goodness me. We're still waiting for Hone, that's for sure. In the Scilly range then, taking a look at the Atlantic with that invest there. Obviously it became a storm, maybe a hurricane, and it's still winding its way around the Caribbean, maybe going in for round 2 there in Nicaragua later on as a much weaker system, and then maybe 1 or 2 other systems trying to form out of what comes of all of this mess as it spreads itself around that whole region, becoming a bit of a gyre really, with some strong winds pummeling Cuba and moving off towards the northeast. More of a winter pattern though, that's for sure, on that imagery there. So an uncertain Atlantic. The Eastern Pacific then, you can see Pilar, it's still going. Then it starts to cut in towards the northeast and weakening slowly, but still holding on to hurricane status quite a bit there. And it is still active near the end of the run, 14th, 15th of November, and there it is. It's still not fully dead at the end of that 16-day period, so it lasts out the whole model run. And I'm not sure that is particularly common at this time of year. It really is in the last dregs of the Eastern Pacific hurricane season, and that would be quite impressive, I think. While the Western Pacific really throws up this typhoon late on in that run through the Philippine Sea, a lot of energy there, and we do sometimes see this in the late season. Look at that, a very powerful Category 4. GFS is quite low resolution. I might wager that could even be a Category 5 there heading for the Philippines. But of course that is extremely long range, getting towards the 11th, 12th of November. It's a long way away, and that could still change a whole lot, or it might not even happen at all. If it did though, it stalls over Luzon and causes probably a huge amount of rainfall. You can talk about all of that on our Discord server, discord.gg/force13 for tropical weather and general weather chat, with thousands of members from all around the world, in real time. Well, speaking of which, there was a very historic Category 5 landfall in the Philippines just 3 years ago, when Typhoon Goni made landfall on Catanduanes after peaking with winds of probably close to 200 miles per hour, an extremely powerful storm. We also had the formation of Tropical Storm Eta in a similar location to where that invest is expected to form, by the way, but hopefully won't get anywhere near as strong. And at Sani was about to form in the Western Pacific. It's actually named there. It wasn't named at this point, but that's just a little error there. It was still a depression, but it would become at Sani. Back to today, and the next name on the Atlantic naming list is a highly anticipated Vince. In the Eastern Pacific now, it's Ramon, and in the Central Pacific, the next name is still Hone. 75 storms so far this year. Feels like it's been quite a slow slog of numbers, but we are getting close to that average. Jelawat is next in the Western Pacific, and Midhili is next in the North Indian Ocean, although I'm not sure when we'll see that one, but certainly still time in that basin. In the Southern Hemisphere then, of course, things will pipe up soon. After Lola, of course, Jasper's next up in the Australian region, Alvaro in the Southwest Indian Ocean, and Mal in the South Pacific. That's all from tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin. We'll be back again tomorrow night.